Hey guys, Monkhouse here and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing token-based authentication using Django, VueJS and Axios as our client to talk between the two. Now, we want to start by setting up our virtual environment. So firstly, I've created a folder called tutorials. You don't need to do this, you can call it anything you want. It's empty. And inside it, we're just going to check that we've got Python 3 installed. I'm currently on Ubuntu, by the way. And we've got it installed, and I'm going to use the default venv package from Python, part of the standard library, to create a virtual environment. And we can do that like so. And I'm just going to call it tutorial env. What this is going to do is create a virtual environment for us, which we can now activate with the following command: source tutorial env bin activate. What this basically means is, if you don't know, anything that we install regarding Python will only be inside this virtual environment and only available to us inside that virtual environment. If we, for instance, deactivate it, and I can show you this later, it would no longer work. So we want to make sure this is activated, like so, and we can start doing our installations. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called pip-tools, which is probably my favorite Python tool. And it's the only thing we're going to install in a traditional way using pip. And then we're going to use pip-tools to install everything else. So we no longer need to specify Python 3 because we created the virtual environment with Python 3, so we can just do our Python version like this, and it's the same as before. So that's great. We're now going to pip install pip-tools. And this is one of my favorite tools, like I said, and we actually can't do pip-tools help. It doesn't come up with anything. But what we can do is it basically just installs two commands, which is pip compile and pip sync. So for example, don't get too confused here, pip compile help, we can do that. So here we can see all of the commands that we can use. We can do like a dry run, we can have verbose, or we can have quiet. And we've also got pip sync, which actually will download our files for us. Again, don't be too confused by this, don't worry about it. Again, we can do a dry run, which will basically, a dry run is just saying this worked, and then you can go ahead and do it if you feel like you want to. I'm probably going a bit off topic there. So what I like to do is go inside the tutorial environment, so that's what we're going to do. And we're essentially going to work from here. So we're going to start now by creating our requirements file. And inside there, we're going to put everything we want to install. I'm just going to use Nano for this. So we want to do Django, and we can actually specify a version. So Django 3.2. We want Django REST framework, which is what we'll be using. Framework. This needs to be spelled correctly. JOSA. We also want Django CORS headers. I don't know if that's one. No, I think it's like this. And this is all we need for now, but here you could have PyTest, and you can have any Python or Django package that you can think of, as long as you know the pip name for it, and it will install it. And what's great about pip-tools is it will now go, so we use pip compile, which creates a requirements.txt file, and we'll actually be able to see what it does. So it's actually getting a bunch of other dependencies we need. What it essentially does is, if we specify that we want to set up our project with a specific package, it will go and grab any other dependencies that has, and on top of that, it makes sure that all of our installed dependencies work together nicely out of the box. Now, so if we did a pip sync now, I wanted to do help again, we can do a dry run. You don't have to do this. So we can do -n, pip sync -n, and it's going to tell us would install all of these packages. So that's what it's going to do, so we know it's working. And we're going to go ahead now and install everything. Excellent. So we can now check that we've got Django installed, like so, which we have. So that's it in terms of installing packages for Django. So that's the first chapter. In the second chapter, we're now going to set up our Django project. So that's literally how I set up every new Django project that I start, and it always works. So I suggest you do it like that too. What I'm going to do now is we're going to create a Django project, and we're going to configure all the settings and the URLs and all that stuff. So we now know that Django is installed. We're going to set up a Django project just like we would any other time. So if you've followed the main documentation on Django, then it's just like that. So we can use Django admin start project, and I'm going to call it tutorial. That was really quick. I didn't expect it to be that quick. So we've set up our tutorial, and I'm going to open this folder now, directory, using VS Code, like so, and then we're going to go ahead and navigate inside it. So here we can see manage.py and our tutorial project settings. It's actually opened it over here. Yeah, I trust the authors. And we just want to come into the settings. Now we need to start by adding things into the installed apps section. So we've got REST framework. We need to use something called REST framework .auth token. We want JSON, and we want cause headers, and then anything else we want. That's it for what we need. We also need to add some middleware after session, and this is all found in the documentation, which I will get up. In fact, I can start doing that in the background quickly. My internet has temporarily stopped working. It's fine. I know what I need to do anyway. So we're going to say cause headers dot middleware. This needs to all be spelled correctly. So we've got middleware dot cause middleware. So we need that for our cross-origin stuff to work. We also want to set up cause allowed origins, and this is a list. For some reason my internet is not connected, and we will be looking at this documentation in just a moment, which is kind of the main part of how we're going to do this token authentication. Now, cause allowed origins is going to be the domains that are able to access our backend API, which is what we're building right now. So that's going to be this one. So of course Django by default is on port 8000, so we're going to allow our own website to make requests. We probably don't need that. And HTTP localhost, and that's on 8080. And when we create our Vue project using the vue-cli, this is the default port, and this is the default port that it's on. So we've allowed that. And what else do we want to do here? We can have some settings too. We do want some global settings for REST framework, which is going to be a dictionary. And we're essentially going to have REST. We have default authentication. This all needs to be spelled correctly, of course. This can be a tuple or a list, whichever you prefer. I'll use a tuple. REST framework dot authentication dot token authentication, which means this is you need a comma here. Make sure you have this. And we can also set default permissions if we want, and we can set up some default permission classes too, which will apply to every view on our page. We can also overwrite these at any point we want, so don't worry about that. And that's going to be permissions dot is authenticated. So what we're saying here globally is that we can't actually access any of our API endpoints unless the user is authenticated. So that's what we're saying. And if we're creating additional views and you say in your project you want people to be able to just access anything without being authenticated, you can always overwrite this in your main view, in that view. So that's everything we need. We're going to go into our terminal and we're going to do python manage.py and we're going to just do migrate. And because we've been able to do the migration successfully, I'm assuming that everything is working correctly and we've got everything we need. So a couple of things we still want to do before we're done here, and that's set up a super user. So python manage.py create super user, and we can just say username is admin and email is admin@gmail.com, something like that. My password is going to be password123, which Django doesn't like, but we're just going to allow it anyway. And that's it. Python manage.py run server. That's not it, by the way. We're going to open this now. I want to open it in Chrome, but by default it's going to open it in Brave. So let's come here. So we've managed to do this successfully, but we're not quite done yet. We actually need to navigate to our URLs, and we need to import include because we're going to be using it. And if you're wondering where I'm getting this information, this is probably a good time to start looking at the documentation. So we're using JOSA, which is going to allow us to do the token authentication, and it shows us how we can pip install it and how we can do something using JWT, which we're going to do in the next video. Here it tells us about configuration, so we need REST framework, and it's got a URL pattern. I think this is a simple configuration. On the next page we can actually see that there's a slightly more complex configuration, a slightly better one. We'll come back to these curl requests. So this is how we do token-based authentication. That's what we want, and this is what we've done on installed apps. We had REST framework.auth-token, and JOSA. So we've done that. We need to add these two to our URL patterns. So let's go ahead and do that. And we don't want URL, we're using path. We also want to change this, and I want to change the path also. The most common thing to do is API and then the version, like so, and then when you upgrade your API you can just switch it to v2 and so on. So this is good. Our URLs are now done, and it's telling us we need to add this. So we have a tuple, and we're putting our token authentication, and then we're migrating, and this is how we would do it using JSON Web Tokens, which we won't do. I won't explain the difference yet either, so don't worry about that. So we're done now, and what we can do is we can now go to the URL we created, API v1, and it should work. So we're at our API roots now, and if we just type in anything, we can actually get all of the paths that are currently available to us. Notice here we have like token login and token logout. So when we start creating our Vue.js app, this is how we're going to log in and authenticate on our Django backend, and how we're going to log out. And users is just how we kind of we can post, we can retrieve. You can see users.me, it gets the current user, and there's a whole bunch of different paths we can use. The user path is how we would create a user using signup, which we'll see. So anything else I want to say here? I guess what we want to do now is I will end it here for this chapter, and then in the next chapter, which I guess to you is coming up immediately, we will actually play around with the API. So what I want to do now is come back to the documentation, and here we can actually start seeing some curl requests. So we've got a curl request here which will allow us, so what we're doing here now by quickly is just playing around with the API to see if it works using just curl. So register a new user. We don't need to register a user because we've done that. We've created admin with a password. Now let's access the user's details. So we're going to go ahead and steal this. And we can actually see right now that it's going to return this authentication credentials were not provided. Copy and paste that. Now you need to make sure the path and the port are correct to what you've stated. So for me, it's API/v1/users/me, which remember we just looked at /users/me here. And it's going to say authentication credentials were not provided, which is perfect. That's exactly what it told us was going to happen. So as we can see, we cannot access a user profile without logging in. Pretty obvious. Now here we get to see how the token authentication works. We're going to log in now with this line, and it's going to return to us a token. And then what's going to happen on our front end is we're going to take that token, we're going to store it in our, and we're going to store it in our local storage. But we'll get to that. I didn't mean to post. So once again, port, path, token login, data, username was admin, password was password 123, and it's worked. We've got our auth token, and now this token we would essentially need to pass every time we make a request using Axios to the backend, or at any point. Basically, because we've said you have to be authenticated in our settings, we're saying you must be authenticated. Therefore, when we want to access information, we must always pass this token that is given to us when we've logged in. Okay. So let's access the user's details again. Again, we need the authorization, like so. And this is something that's really important later. Again, when we set up our Axios, we're going to need this authorization and then a token with a capital T. So yeah, just stick around, it's going to be good. So let's just go ahead and copy all of this. Maybe this has taken a bit long, but at least you'll learn and really understand what's going on, which is what this video is really about. So API v1 users me authorization, and we need to go ahead and delete this token and use this token instead. And this should be correct. And there you go, we've got our email, which is admin@gmail.com, ID is 1, username is admin. So we've successfully created the backend now for our token-based authentication. So to create a Vue project from our command line, we need to have the Vue command line interface installed. We can check whether we've got that by doing this command, vue version. I've got it installed. If you haven't, the way you install it is you probably need to do sudo. So sudo npm install and then just at vue-cli, like this. That will install Vue for you. Now, this is Vue. This is completely separate to our Django application that we've just built. You can put it anywhere you like. You don't need to be inside the virtual environment. It's just completely separate, just so you know. So we're going to go ahead now and create a Vue project. I'm still going to create it in here. So you can see we've got tutorial, which was our Django project, and I'm going to do Vue create tutorial app. This is what I tend to do. I tend to have a Django project and then I create the app for the Django project. So let's do this. Then we're going to choose to manually select some features. And actually I want to use TypeScript in my next project, but I won't for now. We don't care about that. We're going to use router and Vuex. Now Vuex is really important for this because it's basically a state machine, and that's how you can think of it. So we can have certain variables like our token and is our user authenticated, and then we can use that as a sort of logic for certain, whether we want to display things, whether we want to grant the user access to certain views, etc. Stuff like that. We don't need a linter, we don't need unit testing, we probably want preprocessors. So let's continue. Yes. Choose that. Config file. Save preset. No. So we're now creating our Vue.js project. And on top of this, we then need to install Axios. So we've got our tutorial app now, and it actually tells us what we should do is do cd tutorial app and then run serve. But before we do that, I am going to open the whole directory in my editor. So tutorial app. So that's now open, and we want to navigate inside it and just do exactly as it says, npm run serve, and this will now automatically be running on localhost on port 8080, which, if you remember, is what we used in our Django project declaration earlier. So we can see everything is working. We've got two pages. We've got our home page and our about page. So Vue.js is installed and our Django backend is working. Actually, one last thing that we want to do. Let's just close this for a second. We want to do npm install Axios. Nice. And we can just run serve again. So we've got Axios installed now. We'll be able to use it. So I was going to do a brief explanation of how Vue.js works, but it was starting to make the video too long. So instead, what we're going to do is you're just going to learn by watching me do it. So what have we got here? We've got our localhost, we've got our Vue.js app, we've got home, and we've got about. Now, if we go to the about view, we can see that we've written this is an about page. It just comes by default. And what's happening in home is we've got this home.vue file in views, which is using this component, which we're going to get rid of. We're going to get rid of this, and I can get rid of this, and we're going to get rid of these things in here, and then home is actually going to be empty. Okay, so inside here we can just write something just to make people happy. So I'll just say hello, and we can now see hello, and we've got about. So that's the basic functionality. We have different views, and we can put our specific code inside these template tags, and they will appear on the web page. Now, one last thing, just a brief explanation. Anything that we see on app.vue will appear on every other view that we have on our web page, which is why these appear on both our home and about view. Now, this router or router dash view basically separates. This is where our code gets included from home and view. So if I just write in here, this will be included on every page, like so, right above the code on those pages. And if I put that code below, then it's going to appear below the code that we have in any of these view files. So hopefully you understand that nice and quickly. Okay, so I just wanted to clear all of this up. And remember, all we're trying to do is build an authentication system. So we want a login view and a logout view. Before we do that, quickly, let's see how this is working. That we have this router.js file, and we can just see that we've got a path. That path is associated with a component, which is this. So in main.js, in our app.vue, we've got this path here, and that path is associated with this. And then we look for this component, and in app.vue we've got about, which is then looking for this about path. And then we've got something a bit crazier going on here. I won't go into that. Which is then loading whatever we've got in this about.vue. Now we don't care about these things, so I'm going to go ahead and we don't need to get rid of this one, but we are going to get rid of this one. Instead, what we want to do is we want to go into here, and I guess we want to have sign up, and we want to have login. This is what we want, that's what we're after. So we're going to create a route to login and a route to sign up. Now, of course, these don't exist yet. We need to create them. So inside Vue, we're going to create a new file. One's going to be called sign up, and we want to keep the same format as the other ones with a capital starting letter, so sign up.vue. and another file which is going to be login.vue, like so. And we can actually delete home.vue, move to trash, and about.vue, move to trash. So now we've got two views. Inside here we want the template tags, and we can kind of just put a div in here, and class can be login like this, and then perhaps we can have h1, and then we want login like so. And then we do actually need some script tags here. You may have seen this before, but if you didn't, just follow me anyway. So we do export default, and then we have name, and then just the name, what we're going to call this, which is just login. Like so. We can copy all of this into our sign up view, like so, and we want to change a couple of things, just so it all corresponds. So sign up, and then this is going to be sign up. Okay, so if we now go to our router path, routers, then this wants to be, what do we call it? So we can get rid of this actually. Actually we do need to do one thing here in a moment, which we'll do. So we did sign up and logging. These are new paths. So this is going to be sign up, and this is going to go to sign up, and the component is sign up. Now this, we haven't imported that, so from sign up import sign up.vue, and I guess we can do import login from views login.vue. Okay, so we can go ahead and copy and paste this. Instead it's going to be login. Hopefully you're following all of this. I mean, I think it's not too difficult. Just play around with it really. We're just really matching the paths to the components. So if we haven't got anything wrong, then this should be working. It seems like we've definitely made a mistake somewhere. So I will investigate. So login, export default, sign up, export default, name, sign up, and we've got app, sign up, login, oh, that's because we're on a particular path. If we go back to our home page, let's see what the console is saying. Maybe there's an error. Okay, they should start like this, so it's telling us that we've made a mistake because it should start with the path. Should look like this, and then we've got our app.vue. Okay, like so. Did I save that? There you go. So hopefully you're still with me. So we've got login and sign up. So this is working now. So all we've done there is we have our main app, and we've got these links, and these links we give a path with this attribute called to. This then matches it to the path in this file, this index.js in the router, and then we have to import the components that we've created in our views, and then that's it. So hopefully you stayed with me there. I think that was quite simple, but please ask questions if you're confused and I will answer them. So this video is definitely much longer than I thought it was going to be, but what we need to do now is we need to create our store. This is important. So we're going to continue. So we need to create two states that we want, which is a token, and the token by default is going to have no value. This is going to be our web token essentially that we're going to be using. Remember when we played with the cur request, we received a token. That's the token I'm talking about. And we basically want to say is the user authenticated, and that's more for our own use. And by default, the user will not be authenticated. Okay, what are mutations? Mutations are a way that we can change our states. So they're just methods or functions, whichever word you really prefer. And we begin by saying initialize store. This is what I've seen other people do. And we're going to take state as an input parameter to our mutation. And in this mutation, we're basically going to say if local storage.getItem token exists, and I'll explain that in just a second. What we want to do is we want to say state.token is equal to that value. And of course, if there is a token, then state that is authenticated is now going to be true for us. Else, we're just going to say the opposite. State.token is going to be blank, and state.is authenticated is going to be false. So what am I talking about? Okay, well, if I go into here, if I inspect our website, and if you come to application, by default, when you go somewhere in our local storage, we get this token. And this token is just created, and it just exists. So right now, our application will probably go, oh, so you actually have a token, so you're authenticated. That doesn't matter yet, because when we actually log in, what we're going to do is we're going to clear this token here from our local storage, and then we're going to take the token that Django gives back to us, and we're going to set it to our local storage. So in that way, it's going to be actually an accurate representation. Then what we're going to do as well, that Django token that gets returned to us by the Django server, that's going to go into all of our Axios requests. So it's just constantly going to be working, and we can go across the website using this local token, for example. Okay. So, which actually reminds me of something that we forgot to do, which is in our main.js, we do actually need to import Axios. So we're going to say import Axios from Axios. That's how we do it. And if you're wondering why I'm using Axios, it's just that's what Vue Mastery course uses. And we can put that in here. So we're using Axios. Okay. That's good. We're kind of done with that file. No, we're not. We want to say axios.defaults .base URL. So all of our Axios requests are going to have this base URL essentially, which is not going to change, and that's making the request to our Django server. So 127.0.0.1, and we need to give the correct port. So any other Axios request, it's going to start with this URL, and then we can just go in our request, we could just go /users, for instance. So hopefully you get that. Okay, so we've initialized a store. Then there's only a couple other things we really want to do, which is set the token, and that's going to take state and token. And essentially when we call this mutation, we will have a token available to us, and we're going to say state.token is equal to that token that we have available to us, and state.is authenticated is going to be true. And then remove token. So this is going to be done when we log out. So state, and we're going to say state.token is just going to be that, and state.is authenticated is now going to be false. And that's really it. That's all we need to do in here. Hopefully there's no errors. It seems that there isn't any errors. So we've set up our states, which is token and is authenticated. So next what we're going to do now, and we're finished in this file, I believe, unless we've made a mistake, which as far as I know we haven't. We're going to come back now into app.vue, and we're actually going to get rid of all of the styling. I don't care about styling. Now we want to create a script. tag like this, and we're going to export default. Name is going to be just app, and we're going to use something now called a lifecycle-hook. I'm not going to go into it, but the way you can kind of think about it is this is going to be called when you first load your app or when you refresh the page, and it's going to be called before anything else happens, right? That may have been a bad explanation, but hopefully that's kind of how I like to think about it. So like when you refresh the page, before create is going to get called. Okay. And when you go on the page initially. So before create is a lifecycle hook, and in it it's just like a normal function. And what we can do is, so we want to do this dot store, my mistake, dot initialize. Hopefully I haven't got a spelling error here. Sorry, I made a mistake there. It's going to be this dot commit, like so. So what we're doing with this command, we're initializing the store. So you can think about it like this: our app is going to load, and we're actually going to come into our store. It's going to call this method or mutation, and it's going to check if there's a token in our local storage, which we know by default it is, and it's going to set this token, and it's going to say true. That doesn't matter too much right now, and you'll kind of see why. But that's what we're doing. You're probably thinking, well, why are we doing that? Because it's the wrong token. It doesn't matter, because this token is in our storage, and eventually when we log in, we're going to delete that token and use a real token, and then the next time we load that, it's going to be true. So that's kind of what's going on there. So we're going to initialize store, then we're going to say const token. We also need to import Axios, so we're going to say import Axios from Axios, like so, and then this dot store dot state dot token. So our token is equal to the token that we've set in our state machine in our store, and then we're going to say if token. We're going to do Axios dot defaults dot headers dot common authorization equals token, and then put the space in here, token plus token. I'll explain that in just a moment. Else Axios dot defaults dot headers dot common authorization is going to be, there's going to be no token, and that's it. And what I want to do is I wanted to bring up that documentation again. So remember this, we had to pass authorization with our request, token, and our token. So all we're doing is before create, we're calling initialize store, and we're getting the token, and then we're saying if the token exists, then we want to set that as our as this header information here, our token. So it's token plus the token value. Now again, at the moment the token is incorrect, but we're going to fix that when we log in. So that's it. We've set up the store, and we have now set up before create and our. And by the way, something I want to quickly say: if anything isn't working, check out anything to do with the defaults and the header information. If anything here is spelled incorrectly, it's not going to work, and I'm willing to bet that's probably where you've gone wrong. So pay special attention to anything you do regarding with Axios. So we're now going to go ahead and create the signup view, and this should be pretty simple. We're just going to create a form, and that form is going to have a Vue.js directive that we usually call v-on, like so, and we can do submit dot prevent, and all dot prevent does is it stops the page from refreshing like it usually does when we submit a form. But since our data will be binded in real time, there's no need for us to refresh our page. A shorthand for this is @ submit.prevent. So you just want to check that out in the Vue.js documentation. Then we're going to have two inputs, and one of these inputs is going to be of type email, and it's actually going to be our username. And the reason for this is this is just the way it comes out of the box. We have to use a username in order to register. Maybe in another video I think you definitely can customize it, so I'd need to look into that. I haven't done it yet, but we can do that. Then we're going to have vmodel, another directive, and this is going to be equal to our username. Let's just define it here so it's a bit easier for us. So what we're going to get an input field, which is going to be of type email, but we're actually going to use that as an email in our database. And to be honest, I don't always... Usernames are a bit overrated sometimes. I think we can generate a username and then let the person in their own account or something change it when they feel like. So input type password, name equals password, and vmodel is going to also equal password, and then we want to have a button. And I don't know if we need to do submit, but we will. And this is just going to say sign up. Again, we're not here to make anything look amazing or anything. So here it's just warning us because we haven't actually defined username. That's fine. So this is what things are going to look like. For now, you know, you just need to do some basic styling if you want, but that's really not what we're doing here. So the next thing we want to do is define our data, like so, and we're going to always forget this return one, and we're going to have username, which is this, password, which of course is this, and we want a comma here. So on top of this we can now define some methods, like so. And of course I kind of forgot this, we want to do a submit form. So we're going to submit a method called submit form, and we're going to pass it this data. Wow. Didn't mean to do that. So what's the first thing we want to do? We want to define our form data. And our form data is just going to be our username. So these need to be what Django is expecting. So it's expecting a username, and the username is going to be this dot username, and our password is going to be this dot password. And then we need to import Axios, of course, since we're about to use it. So import Axios from Axios, nice and easy. We didn't actually define our method, so we're going to have submit form. So apologize for that. I guess that's correct, and we want our form data like so. And now we can just make our Axios request. And Axios is really simple to use. So we're going to have Axios. We might want a bit of space between. We're going to use .post, like so. I mean, you can. This is just neater because we're going to have it a number of things. So we're going to have post, and all we need to do is give it that URL from earlier. So we're going to have / API v1 users, and then we're just going to pass it our form data, which is just going to give it a username and a password, which are going to be these values, which are these values. Okay, so .then, we're going to have a response. Whoop, excuse me. bring that back like so. I forgot the curly brackets. And in here we could just do a console.log our response. There's actually something else we can do, which is if it's successful, I always forget. I think it's just this dot, yeah, this dot router dot push. So this dot router dot push, and we want it to go to login. This should work, and then we usually have a dot catch response, which is error, like so, and we're just going to console.log error. So it's nice and simple. So we're posting something, we're getting a response, and then we're going to try and catch any errors if there are any. Now, let's just check everything looks okay. It appears to look okay. Now what we're going to do is, I've got a password manager that I'm going to use. Now I guess we could check it with a normal password, but I kind of think that Django stops you from putting in passwords that are too simple. But I might be wrong. I think we can create simple passwords. I'll try it in a moment. If we go to our Django database, one moment. If we go to our Django database, we've currently got our admin at Gmail. Nothing else. Refresh it a couple of times. And we're now trying to sign up, and we're just going to try and post this data. I guess we can open the console too, because that's where we're going to get any responses. And we can actually see that our response is 201 created, and that actually worked just as we intended it to work. So now we've got something at Gmail. Notice how this is our username. Now if we posted it with just an email and a password, it would fail. So at some point you have to, so we could also put in the email at the same time, like by ourselves. So we could have, in our post here, we could come and make another field called email, like so. And then we could have another field email. Is this dot email? I think that's correct. I assume it is. But that's not going to be this dot email, that's going to be this dot username also. And I actually wanted to try something for myself. Don't need the documentation. If we go back to sign up, sorry, it keeps coming up with some like old username, so I'm just going to take it off the screen for a moment. I guess I can do this one, tom@gmail, and for my password I'm just going to type something in, like, I guess it can be anything. I'm not going to use it again, although I'll just do password 123. I want to see if it actually allows me, and perhaps the email part is wrong also. So let's see what happens. So it's a bad request, so maybe we need to play around with that. Now that could be the password, so I'll try and use a more complicated password first. And I just recommend people play around with this sort of stuff. See, that actually worked. So the problem here was that I used a password which was too simple. So you can't do that. So that's actually our sign up sorted. And if we refresh this, we can actually see we've got tom@gmail.com as our username and as our email address. So if we can't actually change it, which I imagine we can, this is a way you can kind of get around it. You can just grab the email address and the username, and we could at some stage intercept it maybe and do some processing, maybe auto-generate a username, or just completely customize the way we're signing in, which I'm sure we can do. So right now we've got an email address and we've got a username, which is great. What we want to do now then is work on the login, which is going to be slightly more complex just because we're going to be doing a couple things. So next we're going to create our login view. Now remember what we said about the way this works. So what we're going to have is our credentials, which is going to be our username and our password, and we're going to be using the where have I put it? We're going to be using login. So we're going to be giving our credentials, and what it's going to do to us is return our token. And then going forward, with any other requests, we're going to be using this token, especially when we're getting data about ourselves or accessing our information, our models, etc. So that's what we're going to be doing. So once again, sorry, I'm just drinking a coffee. We're just going to be creating another form, exactly as we did before really, so I could copy and paste it, at submit.prevent equals submit form. We're just being lazy. And then this time, yeah, it's the same. In fact, what we will do is we will go ahead and steal this. Make sure we're there. And all we want to do is change this to login, like so. I guess we could give it a name also if we wanted to, but it doesn't matter for the time being. So if we go on this page now, I will actually leave this page up now in the background. We're on our login view now, and it says login up, so we accidentally left up, and we want it to just say login. So same as before, we're going to have our data, which is going to be the same, but I guess we can just write it out, and we're going to have username, and we're going to have password. Now I've made a mistake, and that's like I said in the previous bit, I always seem to forget to do this. So we're almost done here really. Hopefully you're still following along. Data, then we're going to have our methods as before, and we're going to have submit form, and all we want to do is the same as before, const form data, that's going to equal some sort of dictionary, and that's going to have our values. Username is going to be this dot username, and password is going to be this dot password. So let's just check that's all correct. Okay, so they're still bound like so. This is great. This time we're going to have Axios dot post, and our post URL now I need to remember it's token login. That's it. So we're going to go ahead and do /API v1 token login, I believe, and it's going to have our form data. Now what this is going to do, remember, it's going to give us an auth token as our response data. Now we're going to do .then response. What we want to do is, and I'm looking this up, const token now is going to be response dot data dot auth token, which is what we're being given. Just want to double check that again. Yep, auth underscore token. And this is our response, and we're saying dot data, not dot date, auth token, and then we're saying this dot store dot commit, and this is what we did with initialize store before. We want to say set token, and we're going to give it the token value. So if you remember that in the store we're using set token and we're giving it token, we're saying state.token is going to equal token, and state.isAuthenticated is going to be true. Now, we're not really going to be using isAuthenticated in this video, but you can kind of play around with these variables. So, for example, in any of these templates, you could kind of say if this .store.state is authenticated is true, then allow people to have access to like this form or some kind of header, like router or something like that. Did I just do something there? No. So that's how you can use the logic essentially. So you'll be able to use the variable now in certain places to use it as you would a normal variable. Hopefully that made sense. Again, feel free to ask questions. Axios defaults, and here we're doing headers.common, and this is what I was talking about earlier. So take great care once again. So axios.defaults.headers.common equals this token capital and then our token. So we're now setting the token in our Axios header here, and then next what we want to do is local storage dot set item token, and we're going to give it the token. So this is going to make sure that the token is available in our local storage, and then at the beginning, if the token exists, then that's going to set the token in our headers. So that's what we're doing there, and then that's all we really need to do. At this point we could push somewhere, and perhaps we should create another page just to demonstrate that, and perhaps I'll do that. I guess I didn't need to delete home, so what I'm going to do is just to show you guys, we're going to, right now we won't do anything, but we'll go ahead and create a home view. So what we want to do then is .catch, and that's going to be our error. And all we're going to do is, if there is an error, we're going to do console.log error. Something I wanted to do up here quickly as well, so you can have a look at it. Console.log response, and that way we can see what's going on. Now, hopefully, as far as I can tell, this should now be working, assuming we've not made any mistakes. That's what I always say. So we're on our login view, and I want to go back to our Django. We had something at gmail.com, and the password, I need to go from my password manager. So I'm using a password manager just so I have access to complex passwords that Django will accept. Let's log in and see what our response is. So our response is Axios is not defined, or our uncaught error, and that's always a nice fix, at least. Import Axios from Axios, and we can try again. Let's log in, and we can actually see that we've logged in, and we can see our data here. So when we access our response.data, what we're accessing is this response.data.auth token, and then that's the value. And if we go to our application, this token, I didn't just check, should be the same. Let's remember it ends in 39DE, and we've got 39.E, so our token has been set here, which is lovely. And what we really want to do, actually I won't do it right now because, well, I guess I could delete the token and then we can start again. If we now created another view, and maybe this will be the challenge for you, what I want you to go ahead and do now is just create another view, template tags, you can have anything, just H tags or something, let's say home, you can create a home view, and then just do export default, name what you're going to call this single page component, go into your index router, have a path, and the name, and import everything that you need, create the path for it, and then you can just do what we did in SignUp, where we did a push in the response. We did this.router.push. Sorry for switching between router and router. I would actually say router, but I was, people say router in America in some places. So yeah, work that out. But we've actually successfully logged in with our Axios request, which is really quite cool. So it looks a bit messy. We can kind of switch between these views, but it's all done. And the other thing you can really do now is, remember in our store, you had this is authenticated variable, or we'll call it state. And you can literally just go in and create a new view, and you could, inside a tag, I think you can do something along the lines of, let me find an example. You can use the venv directive, so you could kind of do something like this. I'm not going to do it for you, but you just have a directive which is like venv this.store.state is authenticated, and then below you can kind of have a div velse, close that, velse, and then this way a person will only have access to this div. Here you could have some private information, perhaps you could even have the information of the user, and they will only have access to that information if they are in fact authenticated. So that's kind of how you can use these variables. It's in the same way that we've used them here, this.store.state.token. That's how you access these states. So hopefully, and in here you'd have your stuff. So you now know how to, hopefully, maybe you already did, you know how to create views, you know how to do basic authentication. Our next video is going to be JWT authentication, which is JSON Web Tokens. It is slightly different, so we'll be doing that in an upcoming video. If you enjoyed this, if it was useful, leave a like, subscribe. There's going to be loads of more videos like this, so thanks for watching.